last week on the Nicoletti Show. Let's welcome Steve to the show. Steve, there he is. Welcome, my friend.
Dude, 6 seasons? Congrats, Al. That's freaking awesome. I'm so pumped to be here today.
What has it been like running that high volume business for you?
One thing we run into often is we keep just outgrowing our teams. We'll hire all these different people and we're just outgrowing on that record pace, moving on to the next team. There's such a need for this industry. I have yet to tap into the full potential. I know that.
How does Investor Boots give investors that competitive edge in time-sensitive situations?
In real estate investing, speed is everything. And the first to take action usually wins. And if an investor doesn't have access to boots on the ground quickly, another investor using my company is going to. And that's what we do. We eliminate those delays that investors experience by being able to deploy field agents. And our goal is to really help our clients lock in deals even before their competition gets started.
Yeah, and speed does kill. I know that in my business when it comes to probates being done. One thing that I think really stuck out for a lot of investors was the fact that there are ways to get probates done in a matter of weeks to at least a couple months versus 2 years, 3 years. And having that like customer service right at your fingertips can just change what you're doing in your business. And again, like it doesn't matter what state it is, you're everywhere.
Everywhere. I've never turned anybody down for business ever.
Wow, that's amazing.
Currently, my database is sitting between 330,000 and 340,000 across the country.
Thank you, Steve. Really appreciate you. And I'll see you at Family pretty soon.
Thank you so much for having me, Al. I really appreciate it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Wednesday night in the Al Nicoletti studio. I hope you all are tuning in and enjoy this episode tonight. I am already fired up, 9 p.m. Eastern. If you want to get more content from the Al Nicoletti Show, scan the QR code at the top of the screen. You're going to get our link tree. You're going to find everything on our social media pages, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all the other places you can find us. And of course, you can find all the content on probate, quiet title, all the messy stuff. Of course, we got to find out more about probate. You're going to find the videos there, the shorts, the reels, all of that. You don't want to miss it. And tonight, we got another banger of an episode with a guy that's in a local market in the St. Pete Clearwater area, Joey Long. He's been investing, he's hosting meetups, and I really wanted to bring him on because I think this is so important to learn from people that are doing things in your local markets. So I want to make sure everybody's tuning in, and if you got questions, you want comments, drop them in. It's an interactive show. That's what we love. And I'm excited. I'm ready to go. I got the pen and paper, so let's rock this thing. Hey, everybody. My name is Al Nicoletti. I'm an attorney here in Florida, and welcome to the Al Nicoletti Show, where I bring on real estate super investors, rising rock stars, movers and shakers, and leaders of clubs in their communities that educate, entertain, and inspire all things on Florida real estate and always bring in the best in the game. Whatever industry they're in, the local markets, the national markets, Airbnb, commercial land. We want to bring the best in the game to help you level up. We want you to level up in your markets, in your business, in your personal life, on how you can take your companies to the next level. On my show today, I got the investor, the local guy out of the St. Pete Clearwater area, Joey Long. Joey is killing it right now, doing deals, hosting meetups, and I think it was really important for me to have somebody like Joey on to talk about what's happening on the ground level, what's happening in the networking with people. And when we have guests like that on, it definitely provides a different perspective. And he's been doing a lot of creative deals, and he's a problem solver. And that's the kind of people we want on the show to talk about this so it can help relate to other people going through the same scenario. So without further ado, let's welcome Joey to the show. Joey, my man, welcome to the Al Nicoletti Show, brother. What's
up, man? Thanks for having me on. I feel like we've been talking for forever, and it's bound to happen sometime.
It happened, man. And I love what you're doing with the meetups. I think that's fantastic. We're going to dive in on that. But just for people to get a perspective, how did you get into real estate, and what was your journey like where you're at now?
Oh, that's always a fun story to tell. I was actually in college on a lacrosse scholarship. I was on a full ride, was about 2 weeks into preseason, and had to drop out due to some medical issues and had to come home for an emergency surgery. And it just so happened that flight home sat next to an old guy on an airplane and invited me to a local real estate meetup here in St. Pete, and kind of, ball started rolling from there. It was one of those right time, right place kind of situations.
Wow. And what did you dive in on to begin with? Was it the wholesale side, fix and flip? Like, what intrigued you about it?
I was skeptical at first because these guys were all about doing real estate with no money, and it wasn't about wholesaling. And I didn't even know what wholesaling was at the time, but I definitely didn't know that you could do real estate without money. And so the guy that I met, his name's Pete Fortunato. He's kind of known as, I think you know Pete. He's kind of known as, is known as the greatest creative real estate mind alive. So first time I went to that meetup, he's like, "Hey, come take my class." And, didn't have any money, was a little skeptical. I'm like, "I'm not taking this guy's class." And he basically told me, if you promise that you'll take what I teach you and run with it, then you can come to my class and pay me when you can, or, just apply it. And went to his class, realized that all I had to do was talk to people and knock on doors and be able to solve problems. And I really could buy real estate with no money. So took that class, ran with it, and then ended up, I had about, $732 and some change in my bank account at the time, and ended up buying my first duplex with $700 down on creative structure. And then it just kind of clicked. And I was like, I can really do this. And, you can buy real estate with no money. So might as well keep running with it.
Yeah. And that's great that you found that model for yourself and it just works. And for a lot of people, it does. I mean, people get into wholesaling, people do fix and flips. There's different areas to start, but you saw that opportunity with no money down or creative financing. And creative financing is a pretty hot topic right now with a lot of people, depending on the interest rates and what kind of deal you're getting in. Let's jump in on that topic to start. So creative financing strategies in today's market. What are you finding that are some of the creative strategies people are using, whether it's creative financing or other deal structuring in today's market?
Well, the streamlined ones that everyone knows, seller financing and subject to, and seller financing is always going to be there. There's always people with problems that you can solve. That's an option that can be that piece that's missing. And I always say, most people say cash is king. I always say what the cash can get them is king. So it's not always about the money. It's about what problems you can solve and what they're going to be doing with that money next, and what steps you can solve. If you can solve, 10 steps ahead instead of just that one initial step, that's where that comes into play. And subject to is taken off right now, because, there's some gurus out there that are pushing it pretty heavily. But it's also just a good opportunity right now. There's a lot of risk involved with it that people don't realize, but, right now with interest rates so high, and 4 or 5 years ago now, interest rates being at an all-time low, we're kind of seeing some of those somewhat older mortgages start to kind of snowball into that problem time. And it's a good time to be able to take over those lower interest rates.
Yeah. And let me just ask from your perspective, what have you seen some of the downfalls for people that don't know how to actually do it right? Like, like you said, like there's some people that are doing it, they're getting that permission or the right way, but then there's people that don't know the rules. So like, what have you seen out there that have been bad practices?
Not disclosing everything, not disclosing the risk on your side to the seller, not disclosing the risk of the seller to the seller. And a lot of times it's as simple as like, let the bank know what you're doing, because if all those disclosures aren't in play and all sides don't understand the risk that's involved, then it's just going to create a harder conversation down the line if something does happen. And then another thing that I'm telling everyone right now in subject to deals, if with the economy right now, and with a lot of defaults going on right now, if you don't get an extra step of disclosures signed that basically in writing says that the seller is not going to declare bankruptcy after you take over the subject to deal, don't do it. Because in the event that it could be even simpler than that. If the loan gets sold and the new servicer isn't, in the loop with what happened, then you could get foreclosed on a loan that you've been paying. But also if that seller declares bankruptcy, the day after you take over that loan, then you might not be entitled to that equity anymore. And that's a big risk and a bad position that you're putting yourself in. So I always say with subject to deals, just the more disclosures, the better.
Yeah, more disclosures. Yeah, and I think a lot of people would probably agree with you on that. There's not a lot of there's more transparency when it comes to deals is probably the better way.
Yeah.
Joey, when it comes to some of the deals that you're getting into, a lot of people find that there are the small deals And, those can make really good hits if you get, volume behind it. But then there's those deals that you really want to make big home runs on, right? So how are you finding those deals where you can really make the big home run hit, and do it again and again and again?
Well, those deals aren't really found, they're made. So that always comes down to relationship with the sellers. And again, I know this sounds repetitive, but solving that problem. And that problem could be a million different things. And probably more applicable if I give you an example of one that kind of turned into a home run deal. But one that I'm doing right now is I buy a lot of options on properties. And options are something that most people don't even know exists in real estate. And I bought an option on a house 2 years ago from a family that I had bought a house from previously. And they were having some issues with a grandchild that was the grandchild's parents just got out of jail. And there were some custody issues going on. So they needed some money for a lawyer. They called me and said, "Hey, can you loan me some money? I just gave you $250,000 for a house about a year ago. So, where'd all that money go? I'm not going to loan you that money." But we had already talked about this other house that they had that they were still living in now that I knew they were wanting to sell to me at some point. So I ended up giving them the $5,000 they needed for the lawyer for that custody battle. I gave that to them as an option consideration. And that option is basically a first right of refusal for me to buy that house at any point in the future for a price we agreed on today. So that option I paid $5,000 for with I call it the strike price of $250,000, and that $5,000 being credited towards the purchase price. And so now here we are about 2 years and 8 months later from when I bought that option. Obviously, our market's boomed. So even though it's gone down a little bit in the last few months from where I was at when I bought the option, I'm in a great spot. We're going to end up closing on that. The balance that we owe now is $245. We might actually be turning that into a seller financing deal. And then also I'm going to be flipping that one and selling it for conservatively about $520. So that's a home run of a flip right there. And then if we turn it into a creative deal, what I'll do there is I'll sell that house cash. I'll move that collateral to another property. And then when I sell that house cash, I can get all that money and still keep the terms that I set in place so that I can use that money for leverage to go buy more.
Joey, what have been the kind of conversations you have with sellers when you're getting into that kind of deal? Because it's not the usual or conventional buyer seller. Like, you have to explain the long-term game behind it. So what's kind of the education process to getting into that deal itself? Like, how did you explain that?
It's all about, there's an immediate problem that'll run into a future problem. And if I can solve that immediate problem with a plan for that future problem right now, then, that's really the only conversation you need to have. And if you can lay that out for them, it's got to be simplified. As they say in sales, a confused mind says no. So it's got to be something that trust has been built up, a relationship has to be built up. And the thing that people have to realize about 99% of creative deals, subject to deals can move a little quicker because there's desperation sometimes, but creative deals are never a quick thing. They're always built on relationship. They're always built on trust. And so initially it's just, you got to show them situations where you've solved similar problems before. And if you haven't solved problems like that before, introduce them to a friend that has. And I've done that before too. And it's all about, like you said, educating them the right way, keeping it simple, and then showing them the steps of, I can solve this problem now, but we're also going to solve all these little steps in between to where that future problem could come into play if you went the traditional route.
Do you actually give them visuals behind this? Like, do you show them past deals that you've worked on, and not like a notebook or anything or like a PowerPoint, but do you show them, hey, this is the type of deal we've picked up before. This was the condition. This is what this situation was. And this was the pain point. This is the problem. And this was the solution. And this is how it ended up working out.
Yeah. Case studies are, the key.
Yeah.
And again, if you don't have those case studies, if you have a friend that taught you this stuff, or if you have a mentor that taught you this stuff, I'm sure that they do. I would hope that they do have case studies. So, it's like they say, who, not how. Yeah. So if it's something that you don't know how to do, bring in someone that knows how to do it. But if it's something you've done, use that experience to your advantage and show them those case studies. And I even take it a step further. Like I said, I'm all about the relationship. My business would not exist without building the relationships. And I always say that's what I specialize in. So I've had probably 5 or 6 situations now where I was actually able to call the previous seller and say, hey, would you want to jump on FaceTime real quick and kind of just explain to me your situation that you were at before and where you're at now since we've done business together, and just help this, other seller that I'm helping understand the situation and how it all works and what it could look like for them.
Yeah. And over the long run, I'm sure they're so happy that it ended up working out. And for each of these deals that you're getting into, how are you visualizing your exit strategy too? Because sometimes there are deals that you do want to hold and take down, and then there's some that you want to either flip, and there's a short-term period that you want to hold on to them. How do you map that out? Because not every property is one that you want to keep and hold on to.
Yeah. And especially right now in Florida, I mean, with insurance, taxes, and flood zones definitely kill cash flow. But it's tough right now in Florida to hold stuff. It doesn't always make a lot of sense. So unless I'm working on a creative deal right now where could be a no money down, no interest deal. Seller's just really desperate, and something like that I would love to hold on to. But with the situation with the option, if we do seller financing, again, it's a great house to hold on to, but it needs a lot of work. And when it comes to creative deals, there's not that hard money draw that you can take for your rehab. Generally, it's either financial friend, IRA money, or you're coming out of pocket. So, or you bring in a partner. And so with those, I generally look at it as a strategy to help with my vision of scaling. And while scaling isn't always my, I guess, main goal, my main goal is just, help people. But at some point, I do want to get into commercial stuff. So when it comes to those deals that I can turn a creative deal into cash flow and leverage and a profit, that's generally my bread and butter. So like if I can do this where I sell or finance the house that I'm buying, rehab it, sell it, move that collateral, and still be able to keep that leverage, to me that's a perfect scenario, because it gives me ability with great cash on great financing terms to go buy more stuff that maybe makes more sense to hold that I don't have to put as much into.
Yeah, and start making a cash reserve for yourself to get into other deals like commercial, like you said. And that always seems to be the natural progression point for people, is to start at the wholesaling, then do fix and flips, and then eventually find their way into commercial. But they're still in the residential part. They're not giving that up. It's just that it's the wheel that moves the other wheel, which would end up being commercial to get into, or multifamily if you do that. So Joey, with getting into all these creative deals, I know one thing that you talk about is why cash isn't always best. So knowing everything that we're hearing about creative deals, why is cash not always best?
Sometimes they're just looking for cash to go buy something. And a lot of times consumers buy based on emotion. They don't buy based off facts. So where I kind of learned this idea was, I think the name Larry Harbolt too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And so I used to be still am close with Larry, but when he was a little more involved, I used to hang around him a lot more. And one of his favorite stories to tell is a house that he was buying on terms. The seller wanted the cash to go buy I forget what kind it was, but it was like a Dodge Red pickup truck or something. Wanted a very specific year, very specific model. And he was just going to go to a dealership and buy it. And Larry was able to find a friend that had that same truck. Larry bought that truck from him for a significant discount, gave the seller the down payment. The truck is the down payment, and then seller financed the rest of the deal. And that's all the seller wanted. And it kind of came to fruition when I ran into another option deal that I'm doing, where the seller is 76 years old, dealing with some cancer issues. And he's an electrician that works his ass off. And the only vehicle he has is like a 40-year-old work van with no AC. And the second I pulled up in my car, it's an electric car, so he was amazed by how quiet it was, started asking me some questions. And then it turns out all he wanted was enough money to go buy a car with AC so he could drive around comfortably and still use it for utility. And so I was like, wow, I have exactly what he's looking for, and that could solve all the problems to get this deal done. And so now it turns out that I'm going to be trading my car as not even an option consideration, but a remainder interest consideration in 2 waterfront properties over by Tampa Airport.
Wow. So there's lots of different situations out there. Basically, there's lots of ways to get creative with the deals. And
You
that's
can't
why,
assume what people want. You
yeah,
gotta ask them.
got to ask them. I love that. And it's great advice like that, right? You're seeing it on the ground level. Like you're active in your market, in the local market. And like you talked about too, I'm sure some of the challenges that your people are going through have been some of the hurricanes that came through in the last year, with flood zones where people used to invest. Now they're kind of being a little careful with that. What are some of the challenges you've seen right now in that local market in St. Pete and Clearwater?
Sellers facing reality. That's the hardest and weirdest thing to see right now is, right after the storms, people were, 9 out of 10 people would tell us, I want $1 million for this property because that's what I paid for it 2 years ago. A lot of these people, they have the money that they bought it cash. So while there's a lot of short sale and creative opportunities out there, there's a lot of people that are just like, I can afford to sit on this till the market rebounds, or, just kind of the uneducated thought process of, I can sell this for $1 million still. And here we are 6 months later, and I'm going through one of my main, I guess, lists that I'm calling right now is through my dead leads of people that told me, I'm not selling this unless I get $1.2 million, or I'm listing it next week for $1 million and won't take less than, $950. And we're going and calling them now and seeing that they've already dropped price to like 700. And so we're calling them and making offers. And, some of them are like, yeah, I thought that I'd be able to sell it for this much. And now here we are at 50%. And then some other people are still telling us like, I don't care what the market says. I'm just going to hold it and sell it for $1 million. So it's really weird. The uncertainty, FEMA kind of monopolizing everything and making up their own rules, and, people just not fully understanding all those rules, and just changes in everything. I mean, the codes, the 50% rule kind of, came out to the public eye for the first time. Before that was kind of, this little thing that no one really knew about, that only certain investors had to look at in certain areas. But it's all in front of the public eye now. And it's just now reality's starting to set in of, okay, I might not be able to rebuild. I might have to fire sale my house, or, now insurance is making things impossible to where I can't stay here. Yeah. And there's just so many different problems to be solved right now that you got to be able to take things in different directions. Because again, if you're that guy that's just offering 50% of what the value was and offering people cash, a lot of times right now, that's not what they need.
Yeah. And I can tell you some of the things that we've seen just on our probate end is there was one house in particular where before the hurricanes hit, I want to say it was up for contract, maybe like 340. It was a decent area. And not even on the West Coast, East Coast. And once the hurricanes came through, all of a sudden with the flood zones and the flooding, it really changed the dynamic of buyers and wanting to buy in flood zones. And the seller found it very challenging to even get a buyer at all. And then they had to take a big haircut on that property just to get it even on the market. And so now it finally went under contract, but for significantly less. I want to say like 270. I mean, it was a big difference. And that mattered, to the seller because they want to maximize the value, but they also don't want to deal with it anymore. They don't want to deal with that kind of property. So like you said, setting in with reality, because everybody's expecting it to be this high price. They're going on Zillow, they're going on these estimators for their houses, but that's really not what the real buyer's market condition is right now, right?
Yeah.
There's a certain buy box for what people are looking for, especially in the area you're in the areas that the hurricanes went through, and then insurance as well. People are getting nailed with insurance, and we've had on people talking about that on the show with insurance, that you're still going to pay a price because the insurance is covering you, but it really took a hit in Florida. So,
oh yeah,
I'm sure
and now it's down to basically only citizens. So again, that part's kind of monopolized too. So very limited and very expensive.
Yeah, it's a crazy market. Well, Joey, what makes you a really interesting guest is when I first started my podcast, I remember, sitting down and thinking, who are the people I really wanted to have on the show and what was going to be the core elements of my show. And one of the four is community leaders. And I wanted to, at the time, you would have thought this was an interesting process. At the time, I wanted to bring community leaders on, but then it was hard to find. It was hard to find, like, who are the ones that are hosting the meetups? Who are the RIA people? Fast forward 5 years later, it's like, I know you now. I know it's like everything's changing, right?
Yeah, and it's just real estate has gotten so big here. It seems like there's 3 meetups every single day now.
Yeah, there's one for Sub 2. There's one for your meetup. There's Nick Camrata and
I love Nick.
Jared. It's like there's so many different ones, and then down in Southwest Florida, you got Jack's RIA. I mean, there's so many different places, right? So knowing that, and I get to bring someone like you on, what have you seen as the impact of having these networking meetings and the power of networking, and why people need to come network and go to these meetups?
Just being around other big players. Like Nick and Jared are good friends of mine, and I mean, their meetup's amazing, and they always bring in great speakers. I spoke at their event in January, and it's just the way that you learn stuff that you don't know. And, they always, in sales, again, they say, you don't know what you don't know. That's how you learn it. I never thought that, sitting next to this random old guy on an airplane would lead me to where I'm at now, but life happens in crazy ways. So back to, who, not how. Jared is one of my go-tos for, when I have to look at, hey, if I sell off this property, what's the, how are the buyers going to react to this price with, if they have to go and get hard money? Nick, I run a ton of deals by him just because of the volume he does and his experience in wholesaling and acquisitions. And, I met them through networking, and we're all in the same mastermind also, but with James Lascara, we're in the EIMG mastermind. And great group.
Another guy.
James, shout out to James. James is crushing it right now.
Shout out to the whole crew. I mean, we're naming these people that are community leaders. Nick, Jared, James, you. I mean, it's crazy.
Exactly. And I guess the only frustrating part for me is that none of them were here 5 years ago. So it's like, where did y'all come from? But the great part is, like, 5 years ago, like, I was kind of one of the only young guys around here that were doing this. And, I was learning from all the guys have been doing this since the 50s and 60s. So also not only to have that network to learn from other people, but also to have, younger guys that are also core players in this community, in this industry, to network with and partner with and work together with, because, as the younger guys in this industry, we're the ones that are going to change I guess how this keeps moving forward. As the times change, we're going to be the ones that kind of propel that, and the older school ways are going to have to evolve, and we're the guys that are going to make that evolve. So just having, that core group that you can call and talk about deals with, you can trust, you can hang out with, it's amazing. And those networking events are the key to that, because that's where you meet those people. Yeah.
And I agree with you. I mean, going to those meetings is really key. We live in just such a virtual world with Facebook and email that a lot of times, even the dog's excited about this concept.
My dog's barking at a FedEx truck.
All good. Yeah. Probably the seller's contract is coming back to you right now.
I actually did send one out, certified mail.
There you go. See, there's another strategy right there. But a lot of these meetups are really important to make these relationships. So it furthers private lending deals, or now you need a private lender, or maybe there's somebody you just didn't know would be a great connection. And I think a lot of us don't realize the power of that because it's all so virtual. So having meetups like yours where you can, get on the ground and talk to people, because there may be a deal where you're under contract with the seller, and then all of a sudden they're also going under contract with somebody else. But because you have that relationship, you met that person, you talk to that person, now you can brainstorm together on what to do about the same thing.
Let's co-wholesale this together rather than, one of us trying to get snaked.
Yeah. And exactly.
Yeah. Let's team up on this. Let's make it happen together. And that's the cool part about this community now too. Like Tampa, 5 years ago, I feel like Tampa was just, everybody for themselves and everybody competing. And now it turned into this era of just collaboration, and everyone's everyone knows each other, everyone works together. If, you know, I don't know if you know the name Bennett Andrews and John Gardepi, but I would highly recommend having them on the podcast. I can make an intro.
Sure.
Great people, great friends of mine. They run an amazing operation, and they're some of my favorite people to partner with, just because if I have a deal that I can't dispo, because I don't, you know, say I'm a wholesaler, and they're kind of my go-to for, you know, hey, if there's this deal that I'm not sure how to comp, or, you know, if I don't understand the zoning, it's, you know, hey, help me with this. Let's figure this out together. And then I know we did one deal and I knew I could call them for anything. And they're, you know, they've been around for a while. Bennett's been investing since like, I think 2008 in St. Pete. So it's guys that, you know, while we do similar things, I like to say, I'm pretty experienced and know what I'm doing. I've been doing it since 2010. So if you can, even when you just have to bite the bullet and use other people's experience to kind of ease your ego, you know, that's super helpful too. Because sometimes, you know, it's hard to do it alone.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure it is. I mean, you don't know everything, and you got to lean on the experts or the people that have more experience than you in that kind of situation. And sometimes you need a JV with them because they have resources that you may not have, or they may have the ability to have the bandwidth for their teams to handle a certain situation. It really depends what it is, but you're right. Like, making those solid connections can be the game changer. And for anybody that is interested in starting a meetup, what have you found are some of the best practices for building that kind of community and building a meetup like you have?
You got to stand out, especially in this area today. Because like I said, there's 3 meetups a day now. So if a lot of the meetups kind of turned into, you know, show up, grab a drink, there's, you know, sandwiches or something, but then it's on you to network, you know, go talk to everybody, go hand out 100 business cards, and then, you know, hope something comes from that. Where I try to make my meetup stand out a little bit was I always bring in a speaker. And I think a brief period of the meetups being educational is huge for people, because, you know, while you can always meet great people, the draw is guaranteed results. And if people can, you know, guarantee they're going to learn something new, or guarantee, like, when I have you come speak, you know, everybody knows Al Nicoletti. So even just that name's going to bring in people, but not only the name, you have a very unique business. Like, you do stuff that most people, you know, have no clue how to do. So if people can come in and pull, you know, one strategy out of that one strategy could change their whole business. Yeah. So like, not only do I try to bring in speakers, but I try to make my meetup stand out by being kind of the creative meetup now. Because, you know, while I don't necessarily label myself as the creative guy, that's kind of what I've turned into in this community. So I might as well use that to my ability and, you know, make my meetup stand out that way, and make it that, you know, destination where people can go to learn that one thing that they didn't know before.
Yeah. And it's hard. It's hard to stand out, but you got to sit down and think about it. And, you know, there's times I've even thought, you know, what if I ever did a meetup, right? What would that look like? And I'm thinking, once a month is tough, right? Like, once a month is a lot of people will say, yeah, we're going to do that. And they'll do it for the first couple months, and then it'll fizzle, right? But no, is it quarterly? Is it once a year? Is it, you know, and so I think it's really unique. By the way, just a thought that just popped into my head. Have you ever thought of doing like a combined one meetup of all the meetups, like you, Nick, and you guys do like a almost like a summit, but the 3 of you like all together for one giant meetup? James, all 3 of you.
So what's funny is I haven't talked to anybody else about that but Jared. But Jared and I kind of talked about that when I was setting up to speak at his meetup. We kind of talked about that. Like, you know, I think only one time I think we ran into the problem where our events were on the same day, because last year mine was monthly and his was quarterly. But we talked about that briefly, and we were like, that'd be pretty cool to be able to bring in, you know, the Tampa side and then the St. Pete side, and bring it all into one massive meetup where we just bring massive value to everybody. And I haven't talked to James about that yet. And, you know, James brings in a pretty good audience, but I think that could be a good add-on. I like that idea.
I like that idea for you. I mean,
maybe that'll be the one we have you speak at.
Oh, I'm game for that. Let's lock it in, brother. I'm game for that.
Hey, maybe we can set that up for my June or July one. That could be interesting.
Yes, let's do it.
I have an indoor and outdoor space for it.
hey, whatever, I'm down for whatever. You know, the idea of bringing the community together like that is so unique, because now you've got one network that brings in another network, and now you're combining the networks and bringing people that weren't in the same area, and now they get to connect, and there could be new relationships and new connections, and more deals done because of that, and just more familiarity with everybody. And you have James's whole crew, so it's a really interesting concept when you can do that. But I love that you have this meetup, and I want you to make sure you plug that for everybody. So for anybody that's in the St. Pete, Clearwater, Tampa, surrounding areas, maybe a little north or south, what is the meetup, and where can people find it?
So it's called the Lifelong Solutions Real Estate Meetup. I don't have a page for it, which I should, but it's posted pretty frequently on my Instagram and my Facebook page. I think my Instagram's tagged on this page. Facebook, you can probably just search Joey Long and it'll come up. There's not too many of us around here. But it's quarterly this year. Don't have a date for the next one yet. It's going to be either June or July. And like we talked about, I'm going to try to have you speak at that one. But just check my Instagram, check my Facebook. We, post about it pretty frequently. And officially, this will be our first event with our on-site taco truck. So there's your reason to come.
Nice. Yeah, there you go. Everybody's got to go to the taco truck.
Yeah, for real.
But Joey, this is great. I hope people will go. I'm always a big proponent, and I encourage people to attend those meetups and go. I know what it's like. It's one thing to be the speaker, but then I also I'm in awe when I see the people that are there and trying and networking to get more deals and be a part of this. It's a different lens to see through when you're on the speaking side and watching it. So love it. Joey, as I do with my show, I do a segment of signature questions, and just a few for you. A lot of us are moving very fast with our business. We're moving very fast with hosting meetups and a seller's deal. Now you're on a podcast and you're doing all these different things. How do you stay organized in your daily routine and business?
That's something I'm still working on, to be honest, but it's getting better. I finally figured out how to delegate some stuff, and calendar and CRM are everything right now. If it wasn't for my calendar and my CRM, my life would be even more of a mess than it already is. But I'm full transparency. I'm still working on that. I'm in that grind mode right now where it's hard to separate and keep things all organized. So I'm learning to say no a little bit more too, and that's helping.
Hey, if nobody took anything right from what he said, that right there, saying no more is probably a good thing.
Yeah, that's something I'm definitely having to do more of. No more, just brain picking calls. No more, let's meet for coffee. I don't have the time for it anymore.
Yeah. Being more purposeful and intentional with your time will help you stay even more organized and free up your time more for what you want to do. And, one of the quotes we've heard on the show before is saying no means saying yes to something else. So
yep.
That holds true. So Joey, when it comes to sellers, a lot of times, people keep thinking of real estate as the deals and the leads, but a lot of people forget about the sales component side to real estate, where you have to talk to sellers. You have to go back and forth on contract prices. And sometimes it's not about the price. It's about some of the other things that are underlying the pain points and being creative. What are some of the tips and tricks for your negotiation and negotiation skills in what you do?
Ask the hard questions, and ask the questions that it's the uncomfortable questions that bring out the pain. And it's not always easy to ask, especially, as dealing with probates. A lot of the topics are sticky sometimes, and a lot of people are going to be tentative to talk about that, me included sometimes, depending on the person's, personality and how receptive they are. But you can't solve those problems without knowing. So it really comes down to asking those tough questions, and a lot of times finding a unique way to solve them. And I don't look at it as much as sales as I do just problem solving. And while there are sales, tactics in there, and you have to, be able to negotiate, you have to be willing to, you have to know kind of your process when it comes to structuring things and, keeping yourself on the high ground. But that all comes with solving the problem. So if you can be that guy for them, like I'm talking to a lady right now that's been trying to sell her house for 16 years because they inherited it originally. Yeah, no kidding. It's the longest one I've ever heard. They inherited it originally. There's 4 siblings. 2 brothers are in jail. One of them, nobody can locate. And then there's one sibling that's been dealing with it. She's the executor of the estate originally. And no one's been able to solve that. And we talked to her for probably 5 minutes, and we were able to kind of, gauge that relationship, and we know that we could solve that problem. And so we basically told her, in the event, love using that line, that's one of my sales lines, in the event that, we can guarantee a closing and we can guarantee that this gets figured out, would it make sense for you to move on from the people that weren't able to figure this out and go with someone that could? And by the way, here's some situations that we've done similar to this in the past that will give you some confidence.
That's a great one right there. Yeah. And that probably will help solve her issue down the road and shed light on that. Well, that's great. And I think negotiation is a big thing that a lot of investors miss on, or just, a lot of people in business, period, miss on. It doesn't have to be real estate. It's a business strategy that you have to learn, skill that you have to learn as you go. Joey, being in this business for the time you've been in, what would you say has been some of the best advice that you've heard or been given that has helped you get to where you are?
Use what you have to get what you need to get what you want. If you've hung around Pete, I'm sure you've heard him say that before. That was one of the first things he told me. And granted, that's a little more applicable with the creative side of things. But if you can use what you have to get what you need to get what you want, and just use that thought process when going into deals, that kind of helps you solve those 10 steps ahead and create the situation that the seller wants to see to get out of that situation. And perfect example is the car. So use what you have, which is the car, to get what you need, which is the problem solved for that seller, to get what you want, which is more properties, more leverage, more, money raised, whatever that may be. But it's not always about, like I said, the money. It's not always about getting the seller as much money as possible, but using different creative strategies to get them from that point A to point B. And a lot of times you have that resource already. And whether that's a car, whether that's a friend, whatever that may be, it's something that you have now that you can use as those steps to get down the line. And that can apply a million different ways. So I'm not gonna ramble on that too much, but think about that statement. Use what you have to get what you need to get what you want when you're going into your next deal, and just think on that for a minute.
Great quote. Love it. Joey, where can people find you?
Instagram's probably the best way. joeylong.rei, like real estate investor. Not a big content guy, but I'm working on it. So I got some exciting projects coming up that I will be posting some content for. So keep an eye out for those. Keep an eye out for, meetup events, dates, stuff like that. Keep an eye out for if Al's going to be speaking at our next one.
Let's go.
And also can find me on Facebook at Joey Long, but Instagram is probably the best way to do it.
Yeah, and connect with Joey, especially if you're in that market in St. Pete, Clearwater, or the surrounding areas. You got to check out their meetup. And Joey, this has been a lot of fun. Great to just connect with you and talk with you. And again, it's great to hear somebody that's running a meetup and also doing deals on the ground level, right? Like it's a different perspective for people. So Joey, as I do at the end of my show, I do a segment called Final Words, Final Thoughts. Any lasting impressions that you want to give to the audience? Final words, final thoughts, Joey Long.
Don't be intimidated by this market. A lot of people are saying that deals, aren't out there. Get creative. Talk to people like me. Talk to people like Al. Gotta dig in the dirt to find the good ones. So go get a little bit creative. And as one of my favorite mentors says, and Bill Cook, who's also speaking at my next meetup on next Thursday, he says, don't think outside the box. Think what box? There is no box. You can do anything that creates a solution for someone. So get creative, and you can turn those dead leads into deals.
And it's so true. Like, that's so true. There's a lot of people that'll say, oh, there's either no deals or deals are hard to come by. But the ones that you have to dig deep on or really, get the right experts for, there's deals out there. So love that right there. Great advice for people. Joey, this has been so much fun. And
awesome.
Yeah, I'll be seeing you in St. Pete real soon, and keep doing everything that you're doing out there with the community. We love that. That's something that's huge for people. So keep crushing it, brother. And I'll be seeing you really soon.
Likewise, man. Hope to be bringing you some deals soon too.
Let's do it. Let's do those probates, Joey.
Let's do it.
Let's get it.
That's what I'm focusing on right now. We'll make it happen.
I love it. Yeah, and there's money in those probates. I'll tell you, for you or everybody that's watching, there is money in probate, and we see it every day.
Oh, yeah. People are dying every day.
There's always something happening. Well, Joey, it's been a blast. I will catch up with you soon, man. I'll be seeing you in St. Pete real soon, brother.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me on. This was great.
Of course, man. See you soon. All right, everybody, you heard it right there from Joey Long. If you missed any of that episode, go back, check it out, rewind. And there's just so much in every episode with every guest that we have. Little gems, big gems. There's always something out there that people haven't heard from or can get that little tidbit that can help change their business in their real estate game. If you missed any of it, go back, check it out. And of course, scan the QR code at the bottom of the screen. That's when you're going to get everything on our link tree, on social media, YouTube. You know where to find us. We're all over the place. You can't miss it. And join us next Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. Have a great night, everybody. Take care.